Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives, happening every day at 12 on ebizradio.com. Joining me for the Lunchtime Coaching segment today, we have a very, very interesting guest, industrial psychologist and director to People's Dynamic Development, Niels Steinmann. How are you doing, Niel?
Hey, good afternoon, Kevin. It's really good to connect with you today.
Yeah, thank you for making the time. I got feedback from someone who's like, no, you must speak to Niel. He's such an interesting man. I was like, yeah. And when we first connected, I was like, damn, we should tell more people. We should tell as many people about this. Niel, don't you want to just give us a bit of insight? Tell us who you are. I mean, you're an industrial psychologist. One of the things you mentioned is you're passionate about mentoring and leadership and teams but don't you want to just give us insight? Tell us more about you.
Thanks, Kevin, and it's such a privilege to spend the time with you. Yeah, so you know my name. I studied many years ago industrial psychology, and it's such a broad field. I mean, it could. You could end up doing labor relations, or you could do psychometry, or you could, consult and sort of my passion. And I sort of gravitated over the years. I spent some time in corporate, but I really gravitated to leadership development. And I think we've seen the importance in our country, in whether it's faith-based communities, in schools, in organizations, how important leadership is. And I think my sort of mantra is want to help people to really maximize their own leadership potential. And so I think mentoring is obviously something very close to it, because leaders that really get it understand that it's about building capacity so that there's others that can create sustainability, that can do what you've done and even do better than that. And so it is a process of I think reproducing ourselves into others in many ways.
Yeah. So I mean, the first point that we have here, Niel, and I'm like excited to get to this. So you are regarded as a thought leader on mentoring in South Africa, and you also speak globally on the topic, but you are also called the Lion Man. So tell us more about the Lion Man. So what's that all about?
Well, I definitely don't look like one anymore. I've lost my mane, Kevin. But I've really been privileged to have studied lions. Just as an amateur conservationist, I was spending quite a bit of time in the Sabi-Sant, and I met a remarkable man by the name of Jeffrey Nyalungu. He was the game ranger doing research at the time in the greater Sabi-Sant area. And now it's been incorporated into the greater Kruger, so things have changed. But at the time, he was really studying two prides of lions. And sort of just as our relationship evolved, I got stuck in there, and I wiggled my way into trying to spend as much time as possible in the bush. But over a 4-year stretch, Kevin, he studied these two prides, and the one pride was called the Central Pride. And what made this pride so remarkable is, the most successful prides have really females doing most of the work. And I know some of our listeners out there will smile and say it's probably the truth for our world as well. But what made this pride so successful was that the females were so in tune with one another, so in sync, that they had what was called synchronized estrus, which meant that they more or less at the same time fell pregnant, had their cubs. And it's an excellent survival mechanism if you think about it, because they were rearing and raising their cubs in a communal way. And so that was part of the study that Jeffrey was looking at. But quite interestingly, on the western boundary of the reserve, which today is called Ulusaba, was a pride of lions called the Buffalo Pride. And these guys were just magnificent hunters, a pride that were hunting buffalo. And yes, there were other dinners on the menu, but the majority of their kills were 1-ton buffalo. Now you can imagine, Kevin, the challenge of bringing down a prey like this. And when we started to study them, we realized that they were specialists in hunting buffalo. but there was something else that caught our attention. And I'll cut the story, but they were struggling to raise their cubs to maturity. And so they were so successful in hunting, but they weren't sustainable. And I just think it left a beautiful metaphor out there that I tagged on in my consulting work, to start to ask organizations this question: how sustainable is your pride? Are you busy hunting and making big kills, but there's no pipeline of talent? You don't think about raising the next generation of leaders. And so that sort of has just become a wonderful I think thought-provoking metaphor that I've employed over my years in my consulting work.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful way of putting that together, because essentially you're going the central pride, led by a bunch of lionesses doing their thing, but part of their ingrained DNA is to make some little baby cubs and still keep the pride sustainable and moving forward and becoming quite successful to it. And on that flip side, you're kind of going, it's great to be a hunter, but where's sustainability? How do you so it's an immediate kind of obviousness, and that's a good question to ask, how leaders do what they do today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it resonates so well, especially when we, whether you're in mining and you're chasing tons, or you're in a production environment and it's a number of units that you need to set out. I think it is something that everyone, whether it's schools or even in families, I think it's something that allows us to really reflect around, do I want to be part of the central pride, or would I want to keep on chasing the buffalo?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it gives you it's such a beautiful frame to sort of frame it in. To add to this, it's not on my list of questions here, but how do you think? Do you think COVID has also pushed the agenda of that? Because we've now suddenly realized that the agility of our business, the sustainability as you speak of it today, has really been brought to the forefront. And that's leaders are never more than now today having to really be on the forefront of being agile, being approachable, being also having agile in the process of creating new product, for example, right? So I was recently chatting to someone who's an agile expert, and it was interesting to look at. It's great to, like you're saying, it's great to be that buffalo, that hunting buffalo, hunting pride for the buffalo pride. But at the end of the day, how quickly can you switch and start, having a different menu? And I think a lot of leaders struggle with that. A lot of businesses struggle with that.
Absolutely. And I mean, you spoke now around COVID and the challenges and how has that pushed the agenda. I think it's absolutely true, Kevin. I think leaders will, during these times, how we go about leading is going to be just that much more of a challenge. I think leaders will have to show up with greater empathy. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the concept of vulnerability, being able to show that we're human after all. And I'm actually in the process of just wrapping up an article where I'm talking about being able to connect as leaders with those we lead. I fundamentally believe people have two distinct needs. They want to be part of something greater than themselves, something bigger than themselves. And secondly, I think people want their lives to matter. They want to know they are making a contribution. They're appreciated. We've heard that word around, like, we want lives to matter before, haven't we? But I think when leaders understand that in the times that we're in, and I think it's such a common phrase to talk about empathy and vulnerability and all of these beautiful things, but it's more accepted than what it's practiced. And I think leaders are really exposed in these times around that.
It's funny, like you mentioned it, it just dawned on me now, and I'm quite proud of the fact, and that's why I thought to mention this is, if you look at the qualities of empathy and vulnerability, it's such a human quality. Like, these are human qualities. way back when I started my business in 2015, one of my entry points was how to really get people to, in an environment, feel really good about themselves. And no one that I knew was doing anything around confidence, for example. And at that moment, confidence in itself was looked upon as a soft skill. And it is a soft skill, and these are very soft skills. But the strange fact is, in 2015, I was already slipping in like the importance of what a sales team does when they cultivate confidence, right? And I was seeing amazing results. And I was working with the F&B call center around there, the leaders. And yet today, like if we look at some of the core fundamentals that leaders in the world now need are really good honed EQ, like abilities. And if you don't, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've been told EQ has been on the agenda for how long, hasn't it? And but while you were talking about confidence, I remember I had a boss many years ago when I was in corporate, and he had a great mantra. He said, confidence comes from competence. If you are confident without being competent, you're arrogant.
I love that. That's a very good way of thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
So, Niel, you've actually written a book, a few books. Your first book was titled Raising Giant Killers, which is like, wow, it's like, what? But you only wrote that in nearly 15 years after your lion interactions in Sobe Sands.
Yeah.
What was the trigger that got you to write it?
Man, I'm so glad that you've asked that question. We're talking here about mentoring and speaking into people's lives. Kevin, I can make myself vulnerable here and say that I'm really a product of having had some good mentors in my life. The story that I've just shared about those two prides of lions. Well, I was invited many years ago to speak at this conference in the US called the ASTD, or the American Society for Training and Development. And I'm sitting in this small little room called the Speaker Ready Room. And I had some beautiful pictures up around those two prides of lions. And the next moment, someone puts his hand on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Ken Blanchard. Now, Ken Blanchard is a well-known author around some amazing books on leadership. And he asked me about these two prides of lions. And I'm so struck just by being in his presence. And I shared this very story with him. And he said to me, have you written a book on this? And I said to him, nah, I can't even write an essay. I'll never attempt to write a book. And then he said to me, and this will stay with me forever. He said to me, Niel, the reason why you should write is so that your memory can live forever. He said, this story, more people need to hear this. And, he was so inspired, and my word, how about me? And he turned around and he left the room, Kevin. And on his way out, he turned back. He said, if you write a book, I'll write an endorsement for you.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how Raising Giant Killers was born, and book endorsed by Ken Blanchard, and I keep on saying that a single conversation with a wise man is worth a month's study of books. It's moments like that make you realize the impact that a single conversation can have in our lives, and so that sort of really teed me up to go and eventually write the second book called Crucial Mentoring Conversations, because for me, that was a crucial mentoring conversation I had.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, if Ken Blanchard says to you, write a book, you kind of go, yes, I'll write a book. You don't kind of like, nah, like, what do you know? So, I mean, crucial mentoring, you call it crucial mentoring, right?
Yeah, Crucial Mentoring Conversations.
Crucial Mentoring Conversation. Don't you want to touch on that for us, Niel? Because I think, a lot of the time, sometimes I have that impression of mentoring where people have a disconnect, and they kind of go, oh, well, I can just YouTube someone, and that's a bit of mentoring that I can do, which it is to a degree. But tell us more about why you wrote the Crucial Mentoring Conversations, and what's the details here.
Kevin, you obviously have seen that I'm sort of old school. I've got 2 boys, and I keep on reminding them there's stuff that I know that's ungoogleable. So, and I think it's true for life, isn't it? It's often when you have a conversation with someone, you realize you don't know that you don't know, and I've just had such amazing opportunities to connect with people where I left from a conversation realizing I had to follow up. I had to take action on something. Conversations often spark ideas. They carry the fruit of getting us to go and do things. Conversations build relationships. And I think there's a biochemical part of conversations. I mean, I think of this conversation that we're having, and my hair stands up straight because I'm super charged up and excited. And I hope you feel the same way. But I know that the flip of the coin is sometimes you leave a conversation with someone and you just feel the opposite, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, because sorry, just to interject there, but I have these conversations often, and I've had some people on the show, and by the end of the 15 minutes, I'm sitting here going, "Oh my goodness, can we just talk to me, tell me something interesting?" And so for me, it's I love having conversations because it's like you're saying, it's a good way to learn. So it's true, the feedback and the energy that's when you're having a really good conversation really lends itself to so much more.
Yeah, quite right. And I think when conversations are authentic and they're insightful and they give us opportunities to reflect, and and so hence that thinking around the crucial mentoring conversations. I know there's been some amazing work done by Joseph Grenny on crucial conversations, and I think he coins it as those really high stake and tough conversations. But I don't always think that conversations have to be tough, but I do know there's some conversations that will be crucial in our lives at some point or another. And so I try to create a framework of saying, as leaders, what are those conversations we should be having when we lead people? And so it really gave birth and an opportunity to create some structure, because often people are asked, can I come and have coffee with you? Will you be my mentor? And it happens quite informally, but in our own minds, we ask ourselves, so how do we go about doing this? Where do we start? What sort of tools do I need? And so I wrote about 8 conversations. There's probably more, but it's conversations on topics like, what is your purpose? What's your why?
Yeah.
These conversations around what I call career momentum, and it's not how do I get promoted. It's often there's that authentic need to say, tell me how you got to where you are, and am I at the right place? Am I getting the right exposure? What is it that I need? What is it that I'm missing? And I think our younger generation, they don't want to hang around for 40 years to get to where some of us are. They want to know, is there potentially something I could do to fast track or to gain quality exposure? So the career conversation is most definitely, and especially in the times that we're finding ourselves in, a crucial mentoring conversation. And oh my word, I can just keep on blabbering, so please stop me. But there should be a conversation around fitness and performance. And performance really looks at how am I doing? I'm so mindful in organizations that we do work, Kevin, that I think performance management in many ways have become outdated, because it becomes this twice-a-year conversation that looks at someone's past performance. And it should really be a tool to help people perform better now.
Yeah.
And so, when people have line of sight around how someone is doing, feedback for me remains one of the most powerful tools to either encourage or help shape. Or, we have a concept called feed forward, which means, what do I want to see from you in the next meeting? So it's not feeding back, it's feeding what is it that we want you to do. And so the fitness conversation is for me, how ready am I for future challenges? If I want to go and run the Comrades, or participate in an event, or I see myself in a future role in the future, it requires fitness: physical, mental, psychological, emotional. And it's a great conversation to have, because it's a forward-looking conversation. to really just go and delve around what is it that I need to be more ready.
So, like on this note, I mean, it's not part of my questions here, but can I put you on the spot? Because one of the themes that I think would be so great to just have your brain on is procrastination. One of the, like, I come across, a variety of people, from youngsters who are just entering their own career to CEOs and financial directors, and they have a commonality and a theme of procrastination. What do you think that would be like a good sort of conversation to have? Like, what are some of the stuff you could share that with?
Yeah, I smile because it actually, without even thinking, it takes me to that next conversation, which is a strength conversation. And I'm a firm believer, Kevin, that I find myself, I've defined strengths and weaknesses wrong right from day one. We tend to think if we're good at something, it's a strength. And if I'm bad at something, it's a weakness. But here's the fact. I can be good at things, but I hate doing it. As a matter of fact, while I'm doing it, I'm thinking of other things. And I tend to postpone the things that I don't like doing. And so back to your point around procrastination, and I know I'm not giving you a straightforward answer on this.
I love this.
I tend to find that the stuff that I procrastinate on are the things that's my weaknesses, the stuff I don't like to do, the stuff that drains my energy. And I find myself a lot more proactive in the areas where I'm passionate about, that I love doing, that when I'm finished doing it, I feel strong. Well, that's really how Marcus Buckingham defines it. He says, what are those activities when you finish doing it, you say to yourself, I can do more of this. Yeah. And so, if I have to write a paper, or I catch myself and I'm good at it, but I catch myself leaving it out for last until it eventually catches up with me, because it's something that is not naturally one of my strengths.
Yeah. Because one of the things that I always, because sometimes even if it's a weakness and even if you don't like doing it, it's a necessity, right? And you kind of have to get this done. It's stuff, I, as much as I want to avoid it. And for me, it's always about micro habits, right? How do you create a micro habit that you can sort of clear and get down and do, and it doesn't take much effort and energy, but it becomes the smallest forward moving motion of, creating sort of a habit form process. But I'm I love this. And tell us what are the conversations do we have?
All right. Well, there's not a lot more. I think one of the conversations that I find naturally people gravitate to when they're coaching and mentoring is conversation around relationships. And it's really about helping people to understand what's on the other side of me, and how am I perceived, and how do people view me? What are my blind spots, and how do I manage relationships more effectively? And then a conversation that I'm really passionate about, and it was sparked years ago when I read Keith Ferrazzi's book called Never Eat Alone. Sorry to
interrupt, but you are the first man that I've met that I know that has mentioned Keith Ferrazzi. Every time I see people, I talk to people, I'm like, do you know about Keith Ferrazzi? Have you seen Keith Ferrazzi? Do you speak, have you seen his videos? Such insight. That's amazing, man. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you've read his one of his last books called Who's Got Your Back? But I mean, he's really talking about the concept of your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
And so, and then it's really understanding that it's a reciprocal process. It's not about trying to figure out who's going to do stuff for me, but it's the fact that I have a network currency and I need to build bridges before I need them. And I just think we don't explore that often enough around do I have a people plan?
I think as a general rule, people just simply don't. They don't, they have a plan for their life. They have a plan for their career. They have a plan for their finances. They have a plan for their kids' schooling, but they definitely don't have a people plan.
And if you think about it, the first question we should ask in any one of those bubbles is who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just love that one liner you just threw away like that, like build bridges before you need them. I'm going to live by that sentiment, Niel. I'm like, that's mine from now. I'm going to steal it from you. I'm going to say, Niel Steinmann says, build bridges before you need them. I love that. Niel, if you can, I mean, it's so fascinating talking to you. If you want to sort of give us sort of some final thoughts of what we can take away from today, and obviously, you know, tell us where we can get the books, because people should go out and buy them and know more.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, final thought. Maybe this was an opportunity for our listeners to reflect on, you know, who are the people that I have around me in my life. I'm still a mentee in many relationships, and hopefully, you know, informally also fulfilling that role. So we need to think, you know, typically, how do I find a good mentor? What are the qualities I should be looking for? And I just think it's find people that believe in you. That whole idea of being a multiplier, you know, multipliers are those people that stretch you and challenge you, and they see things in you that others, that you sometimes don't even see in yourself. And then, you know, people that have an abundance mentality, people that want to see you succeed, and they obviously someone that you trust. But they need to be accessible and available in the times that we're living in, and probably they need to also be passionate about what they do. I don't think you can light a fire with a wet match. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, you can try. Eventually, the match is broken, or it's like it's terrible, and you're just like, it's not working. Yeah. So, I mean, when do we get hold of these? When do we know more about you? Where can we get hold of you? And when do we get the books?
All right. We have an office in Cape Town, in Somerset West, where I live, and then also an office in Johannesburg or Pretoria. And probably the best way to connect with me would be via email at peoples, with an S, peoples, DD for dynamic development at mweb.coza. So it's peoplesdd@mweb.co.za. And then I would gladly respond. And we have copies of the Crucial Mentoring as a book is still available in the shops, but we would be able to make it, you know, available. It's also an ebook, but we would be able to assist and make it available to the listeners.
Fantastic. So just to reiterate, guys, if you want to find out more, the first book was called Raising Giant Killers. Go and check it out and see, contact and Niel and find out more about it. And the second one, Crucial Mentoring Conversations. Niel Steinmann, thank you so much for chatting to me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. I'm going to email you. Hey, Niel, can we chat? I want to ask you some stuff. But thank you. Thank you for your time. And I'll gladly want to chat to you soon.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a big pleasure.
Thanks, Niel. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.